Welcome to Epic Begins with One Step Forward, the podcast that reveals how to plan, achieve, and enjoy the journey of creating epic results in your life, business, health, and relationships. Here's your host, best-selling author and motivational speaker, Xander Sprague.
Hello, Epic people, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward. I'm your host, Xander Sprague, and today I am so honored to be joined by Harriet Bratt. Harriet, tell us who you are and what you do.
Excellent. First of all, thank you so much, Xander, for this epic podcast. Hello to you and, of course, all of your listeners. As has been said, I'm Harriet. We were laughing about my last name a moment ago, Bratt. Take the meaning you like. But I'm an international speaker, trainer, and firewalk guide. I work with entrepreneurs, specifically leaders, coaches, mentors within that industry to support them stepping fully into their power and not just speaking from live and virtual stages, but creating impact. It's a pleasure to be here.
That is awesome. So I got to start with the firewalking because that's truly epic. How long have you been doing it? How did you get started? And why do you do it repeatedly?
That is the question I get asked, probably second most common. The first is always like, actual fire? You walk on fire? Firewalking. I started, to be honest with, I'm sure many of you have heard of Tony Robbins. I went to a UPW event in 2016, and that was my first experience on walking on fire. I found it exhilarating. I found it amazing. If I'm really honest, and I love Tony, I love that event. I actually found walking across the car park with no shoes on in the cold winter weather in the UK more extreme actually than crossing the fire. I felt more pain in my feet. But about a month later, because of that buzz, because of that excitement, I had another opportunity to walk on fire. And this time, instead of it being thousands of people taken across the coals, one walk, let's go, this was a very different experience. We had about 30 of us in the group, and it was a big round fire, and you could walk as many times as you want. Some people were fire standing. And like yourself, I was just like, mind blown. What are we always told about fire? It'll burn you. It's too hot. Stay back. That's our story. That's what we know, not just about fire, but about anything that's hot. So with the experience that I had, I think like for a lot of coaches, I'm sure with your story as well, Xander, when we experience something that creates a profound difference to ourselves, it's exciting to be able to take that out and share it. So I very quickly went and got myself qualified to become a firewalking instructor. It's an activity that has been done for thousands of years. It's not new, but it was Tolly Bakan from the US as well that brought it into an experiential breakthrough activity. So that's where it was born from. And I just find it an incredible experience that allows people to not be told, to not be reassured, to not have a moment of journaling, but to actually experience their potential and their power and the ability to feel the fear. Like, I don't care who you are. When you're standing in front of that fire, it's scary. Fear shows up. But being able to feel that fear and make a conscious choice to walk the fire really shows people what they're able to feel the fear in their everyday lives. And then, as your podcast says, take that step and move forwards in spite of fear.
Absolutely. And although I haven't done firewalking yet,
I like
to say it's yet. I use not yet all the time, so I'll say not yet. I've done some epic things in my life, like bungee jump in New Zealand, skydive, scuba dive, stuff like that. And I do have to say that fear that you feel, like I know when I did bungee jumping, and I was all excited. It was like total bucket list thing, and I got there. And it becomes incredibly real and different when you're standing on the edge, looking 165 feet down, going, am I really going to hopefully trust that this gigantic elastic band is going to stop me and I'm not going to just plummet? And that exhilaration of like when you first start and you have that moment of, I am fully, I can't stop this, right? I'm in this. And then when you basically survived this thing. You're like, oh my God. It was so great. And one of the funny things is I have they were videotaping it and then they interviewed me when I got done. And I totally don't sound like myself, Harriet, because the adrenaline is rushing so much. They're like, how was it? I'm like, oh my God, that was great. Like I had this total like monster voice.
Yeah.
When I went skydiving, there I am. I did a tandem jump. I'm hanging out of an airplane at like 10,000 feet. And I'm like, holy moly.
That one I can relate to. The bungee jump, unfortunately, we were in South Africa. I had an opportunity to do it. I was standing on the bridge and they called it off because of wind. I don't know if that was a blessing or it would have been greater to do it. But the skydiving I can really relate to. And I don't know about you, the day before, the morning of, the drive to, the airplane going up when you're on your way up, I was in so much fear running all of these stories. I remember looking at the instructor next to me and I said, oh, are we nearly there? Looking out the window and he said, we're about halfway. My stomach flipped. I was petrified. And as you say, there was this GoPro on my face just as you're sitting like open door of a plane, the most unnatural experience when you're flying, and you just see my eyeballs roll back. It looks like I'm about to throw up, but then within seconds my arms come out and I'm, woo, this is amazing.
Unbelievable. I like to say when people ask about the skydive, I'm like, look, first of all, I learned more in the first 2 seconds of skydiving about physics in the human body than any class ever.
Exactly.
Because there's a couple things that you don't realize until you do it. One, falling is a visually stimulated sensation. The human eye only has about, at most, 1,000 feet of depth perception. So at 10,000 feet, you could be at 5,000 feet or 10,000 feet. You're not really able to tell the difference. Your eye isn't. And again, falling is visually stimulated. So I only felt like I was falling for the first like second or two because I had the airplane as a reference. After that, it was just unbelievable. It was like, I'm perhaps a little older than you. So I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and we did all kinds of crazy stuff like not wear seatbelts in the car, hang out of the car while it was going down the road, stand in the back of. So I say skydiving was like your whole entire body, because you're doing like in a tandem jump, you're doing like 120 miles an hour. You're like, holy, this is incredible. The other thing I learned was when you watch the videos and someone pulls, there's a camera person and someone pulls the cord and all of a sudden they shoot up.
Yeah.
The reason that happens is one person's decelerating and the other person's still falling at the constant rate. That's why they shoot up. I will also say that at that point, there was probably enough adrenaline pumping through my system. My leg could have been ripped off and I probably wouldn't have felt it for 2 days.
I can relate to that. And thank you for sharing that. You're teaching me. We learn something new every day.
Yeah, I love, just like you said earlier, experience is useless if we're not sharing it. Knowledge is not, what good is knowledge if we just hold on to it?
Absolutely. I think there's that quote that says knowledge is power. And I always say, no, knowledge is not power. Using, executing, or sharing that knowledge is power.
Absolutely. It's what I'm all about. I want people to step into their epic.
Yeah.
We all are so capable. And the fact of the matter is, even before you started doing all of this, Harriet, you'd already done epic things in your life, but we somehow discount it and we forget and say, I overcame this. I have, if you have ADHD, a learning disability, some kind of a physical, something happens. You're 5 and you crash on your bike and break your leg really bad. I don't know.
Yeah. And even I think I completely agree with you. And I love that you're sharing that. And I think sometimes, as you were saying, it came to mind this weekend just gone. I had a conversation with my husband, and he's an incredible man. And he's all of us on our own path and journey, but he's in the personal development world. And he was someone that always said, I'm not good at communicating and I'm not an emotional person. And of course, over the years, we've been having these different conversations, been in this world. But this weekend, he sat there And in the most vulnerable space I have ever seen him in, he shared some of his truth. And I think that's epic. Like speaking up, having a difficult conversation with a loved one in these little tiny moments that, as you say, sometimes just become part of life. They're actually epic moments that are part of defining who we are and how we move forwards and enjoy our life.
Absolutely. And when I talk about epic, obviously epic evokes huge things. And some people's epic journeys are huge, but my epic is not your epic. And the cool things that I've done all came just because I decided that I wanted to at least try to do it. And people forget that so often people's epic dreams, maybe they want to write a book, run a marathon, travel somewhere. Okay. And that seems impossible. How am I going to do it?
Yeah.
We fail at stuff. We fail every single day at stuff. Doesn't mean that we stop.
Exactly.
And yet people are like, I can't do it. I need to have all the steps. And I'm like, I can assure you, in writing 3 books, and by the way, that is in and of itself epic, because I'm not trying to brag. I'm a talker, not a typer. And I just seriously, every day I see my books and I'm like, how did I write 3 books? This seems impossible.
Well, I love a podcast. That's epic. And it's inspiring for others to hear you share that. Oh, he wasn't a natural writer. He's more of a talker. Maybe I can do it too.
Yeah. And that's what I want. I encourage people is like, whatever your epic could be, like you go, I want to change the way I eat, or I've always been scared of public speaking, but I don't want to be scared of that. So I'm going to go take a speech class or volunteer to do something. Whatever your epic is, it's your epic.
And go for it. And I think there's something you said there that was so important. We all fail. It doesn't mean you're a failure.
No.
About taking the steps. I never call them mistakes. I call them mistakes, right? It's just a part of life. It's a part of your everyday. And if you want to progress or do anything that feels outside of your comfort zone, that feels scary, that feels different, it is about feeling that element of fear, but stepping up or taking action anyway.
And as I say in my book, the only thing you fail 100% at are the things that you do not try. And again, as an entrepreneur for the last 2 decades, I've tried things and failed at them. Maybe it's something for my business. Oh, hey, I'm going to have this package and it just doesn't sell. It doesn't work. It's just doesn't seem the right feel. I don't know about you. You're an entrepreneur too. Been a very generous person, buying lots of software tools that are supposed to help me do my job better. And it's not that they're bad. They're just not the right tool for me. As a person who ran, there are lots of running shoes and they're all really good. I just needed to find the ones that work for me.
Exactly. And that's so important. And I think especially we're talking about epic, we're talking about taking that step, we're talking about doing what's important to you in your life. And that'll look different to everybody. And even I always laugh at things like morning routines, because there's so many different books of what you should do or what you should include in your morning routine. And it's the same thing, like what works for you, what is the best thing for you in that moment, and allow yourself to find that. And sometimes it takes time.
It does.
But you find it through trying.
You do. The fact of the matter is, as someone who's a licensed mental health professional, I understand how change is hard. We talk about, step out of your comfort zone. We have comfort zones for a reason. There's literally like evolutionary reason of here's what I know. Here's how to do it. And change is hard and it does take time. It's not instantaneous. And it takes practice. It's called practice for a reason. A habit takes practice, right? We all have practices, right? In taking some coaching courses a few years ago, I was assigned a practice, right? And it was assigned to me because it was challenging for me to do. But for someone else, it was totally easy. And what they had to do, like one person's practice was to talk to a stranger, someone they didn't know, start a conversation because they were afraid of interacting with other people. And I'm like, oh my God, could you give that to me? Boy, that would be so easy. But I get that it's different. And we like structure. You were talking about the morning routines. We all do stuff in a particular order because there's structure and it makes us feel comfortable. When all of a sudden that gets disrupted, whatever your morning routine, let's say the alarm doesn't go off, so now you're late, so you don't have as much time to eat your breakfast or whatever. Like the train is off the tracks for a little bit.
Exactly.
Right? Like you're like, but it's like, why am I so discombobulated? Why? Because it was structure. You knew, you felt comfortable. I know how to do this.
You're happy in the familiar.
Right. And structure does help us on our epic journeys. When I first decided to run a marathon, I had no idea how the heck I was going to run 26.2 miles. But I joined Team in Training, which is the fundraising side of the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And they gave me a training schedule. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I rediscovered that I'm structure boy. I like structure. It makes it so much easier because all I had to do is look at that calendar and it says, go run 30 minutes. Okay, I do. Then I'm done for the day. I don't have to worry about how am I going to get there. It's all step by step.
Another epic moment, by the way, for you there with the marathon. Nice. But yeah, I completely agree. And interestingly, some of your listeners or viewers might be thinking, oh, no, not for me. And I was that girl, a little bit with my ADHD, but also my personality and just the story that I was telling myself. No, I want to be free. Like here today, gone tomorrow. I don't want to make plans. Diary? What diary? And obviously becoming an entrepreneur had a big shift in that. But actually, I really started to see structure brings freedom. Structure gives more space. Instead of carrying all these things that you want to do or you're thinking about around inside of your head, and more often than not, for example, training, thinking about it and doing it are very different things. And when it's just scheduled in, it's there, you are much more likely to take action, especially if there's accountability to it in certain tasks. But you're much more likely to take action. And then once you've done it, now you're free. You've got that space to think about the other areas of your life or your other priorities, whatever that might be.
And when I was doing my internship for the hours I needed to become licensed, I was school-based. So it was middle school and high schoolers. And a lot of my clients had academic challenges. Some of them had ADHD. And so I'm like, I get that it's hard to stay focused long-term on tasks. And I brought in something that I had used in my academic career, which is I said, look, for homework, structure is your friend. So start off, do your homework in the same exact order every single day. Because that way you don't, what do I got to do? You know what you're doing and you do it in the same order. I said, and if you don't have homework in that subject that day, you just go to the next one. Start off with the one that is your least favorite because it will take the most amount of energy for you to get through. Work your way towards the easiest one. And for my clients who had ADHD, so perhaps 20 minutes was what they were able to stay on task, and then they'd start to get distracted and stuff. No problem. Map it out. Know that I'm starting my homework at 3:00. 3:20, I get a 10-minute break. I'll set an alarm on my phone. When that alarm goes off, if I'm watching TikTok, YouTube, dancing, whatever, I go back to my task. And my clients who did do this, especially the ones with ADHD, reported back that homework wasn't as hard. It was hard, but it wasn't as hard because they're like, that structure really helps me. And I know, hey, I got 5 more minutes and then I get a break. I'm okay. I can push my way through. And that structure, you're right. There's so much more freedom when you create the structure because you know what you want to do and when you want to do it. And you discover that you have so much more free time.
Exactly. Exactly. And I can really relate to that, especially from the ADHD side. And almost though to merge our previous conversation in with what we're sharing now, I think it's that identifying what does or what doesn't work for you. And I think the Pomodoro theory is exceptional for people with ADHD, but I also think it's encouraging like the way you do something. So for example, I can be hyper focused if it's something I love.
Oh,
You know,
gosh, yes.
exactly. If I'm crafting a speech, if I'm prepping for an event, if I'm recording for an online course, like I'm in. In fact, you're going to have more trouble stopping me. My husband is at 2 a.m. Are you coming to bed?
Yeah.
In. But if I'm doing my taxes or my admin, just being honest, there are accountants that buzz off numbers, not me. So I have to do exactly what you just shared. I have a standing space as well. I stand, I have music on, not that I would start dancing or
but just background music. Yeah.
exactly. And I'll stand and exactly as you say, I'll have a timer on 20 minutes. I'll do it. I'll go off for a dance. I'll walk out in the garden and then I'll come back and do another session. So it's really seeing and finding what works for you as well.
Absolutely. And it does take experimentation to say, is it 20 minutes? Is it a half hour?
Exactly.
I know from being a technical instructor for 17 years, taught people software. So I got very good at, I was teaching highly complex things. And I would take breaks and people are like, why do you keep taking breaks? And I'm like, because your company is paid for me to teach you how to use the software that they bought. You can't retain anything much past 45 minutes, but really more like a half hour. So I'd go for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and I'd have a short break and bring them back. And I'm like, I could go, like you and I are probably similar. We could talk for hours on end about the things that we love. In fact, we want to. But that's not the point here, Harriet. But I want people to remember, I delivered all that information to you, but you're only retaining the first half hour or so, and the rest of it's blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I know Xander talked about it, but I can't recall what it was. So I think finding all of that. Now,
sorry, I got into what you were saying and I thought I train speakers. So especially from that perspective, I see speakers so often that try and just talk at their audiences for an hour or 90-minute keynote. And I think, if you're running an event, as you said, have those regular breaks to give people the space to really make the most of their attention span. But even if you're doing a keynote for 90 minutes, have that space for interaction, have that space to capture their attention again. Remember that people are not going to absorb everything you say if you just talk at them for 90 minutes over.
Tell some stories.
Exactly. Stories, exercise, question, engagement. It's,
Yeah, I've got tons of stories. I love stories, but I think a lot of times my goal is for you to remember 2 weeks from now what it was that whatever my point was, be it teaching or a motivational speech or whatever. I want you to remember it. So I'm going to tell you a story, an anecdote, something that hopefully 2 weeks from now, when you're like, oh yeah, that was great, and all of a sudden something comes up. If you remember the story, you remember the point, and I succeeded. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I always share that. I think it's Les Brown that says, never share a point without a story and never share a story without a point.
Absolutely.
When you're able to do that in an effective way, exactly as you've shared, people are much more likely to remember the main message.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things I love to ask my guests, as I shared earlier, not yet. I think such powerful things for the journeys that we're on. Some of our journeys take time. So, for example, when I was training for the marathon, if someone's like, oh, have you run your marathon? Not yet. Why? Because it's 2 months from now. It's not time for me to run it. One, I'm not ready, but two, the event isn't happening. People kind of get that. But then when we're on other personal development things, people go, no. Harriet, have you finished your book? No. It makes it sound like it's never going to finish. But the fact of the matter is it's a highly dynamic process. The writing part is challenging, but frankly, the editing part takes even longer and is more challenging. Because frankly, you get tired of reading your own words after you've read your whole book 6 times. You're kind of like, it comes out and everyone's, oh, I'm so excited. And then you're like, And I really don't want to see my book for a month. I've just been through every word 6 times in the last 6 weeks. Anyway, but what are some of your not yets?
My not yet is speaking in a stadium.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
Heck yes.
Yes. Let's put some fire into that. So that's a not yet of mine. Moving to Europe with my husband is a not yet, but a more immediate. I'm excited that'll be happening more soon. I love this question. What are a couple of other not yets? Building my speaker membership. It's done, but I'd like to see it at 100 members and that continuously growing. And I think some of my bucket lists, you reminded me of the bungee jump earlier. I'd like to do a bungee jump again. Certain areas of travel. Have I been to Canada snowboarding yet? Not yet, but I'm doing it at some point.
Totally.
Great question. And off the top of my head, those are the first few not yets that come to mind.
I gotta say, totally the fill a stadium and talk to them. Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you.
And I'll start off with a small stadium, but I gotta say, I was watching Bohemian Rhapsody and I'm like, wow, if I could fill Wembley Stadium and people were all excited to hear me speak, that would be awesome.
Phenomenal.
I shared that with some people like, oh my God, that's 60,000 people. And then I'm like, I know, isn't that just incredible?
Exactly. And then get in the energy of it and it's exciting. And there was something you shared there. I usually say if it's something that I'm really is important to me and it's a priority and it's a not yet, I always say when I achieve this. And again, you could say, I'm going to fill the Wembley Stadium, I'm going to fill O2 or whatever your stadiums are over in the US. And they're all people that go, no chance. Absolutely not. You're not a big enough name yet, blah, 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 all these things. But actually, all the people speaking in those stadiums at some point weren't doing that and it became a goal or it became another step in their journey. So it's absolutely possible. It's just how you approach it and whether or not you keep taking that epic one step forward every time.
Absolutely. And it does. It builds on itself. But again, the things that we want to do, even if everyone else there's crazy, there's no way. This is not the body of a marathoner. And yet I ran 10 halves, 4 fulls, and a 50K ultra. Why? Because I just said, I want to try.
Yep.
And I'm going to finish this. It may be ugly. It took me a long time. I'm not a fast runner. I did a run walk thing. It doesn't matter. I crossed the finish line. I completed it. And I think that's what's so important is the people the rock bands, right? They may have dreamed of playing at Wembley or O2 or AT&T Park or Madison Square Garden or whatever.
But at some point they were
and they got there because they're like, I want to make this happen. Any of the people that we know that we see and go, wow, how did they do that? It's because they just said, I'm going to achieve. And if I don't, it's not for lack of trying.
Exactly. It's so true. And I think we started this around the fire. And even with my speaking, I remember I was from a tiny little village right at the bottom of the UK where no one had barely heard of it, let alone done it. So pretty much everyone thought I was crazy. You're from Cornwall, you're going to become an international speaker? Yes. And I now run events around the world. That was crazy to a lot of people, but it was important to me. So I took action on it. And the same with the fire. You stand in front of that fire and think, oh, am I going to be able to do this? And they do. It's just being able to take that conscious choice. And I think it's Susan Jeffries that has that book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Yep.
Feel the fear, take the step.
Absolutely. Harriet, this has been just so awesome. So epic.
Wonderful. Yeah. Epic. Indeed. It's been epic.
Truly epic. Now, how can people get a hold of you?
I would say my website, harrietbratt.com, if you're someone that's interested in improving your impact and your income as a public speaker. But if you would like to connect, if you just want to ask a question or have a conversation, then I warmly invite you into my DM on either Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn, Harriet Bratt Speaker.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming in. Truly an epic conversation. Hopefully you and I might be both giving a speech in some huge stadium together. That would be awesome.
That would be incredible. We already established that we do an event in where you live in a similar area. So I feel that we do need to cross paths. But I also just want to say thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation. I love your podcast and what you're doing for your community. And for everybody listening, trust what this man is saying. You have epicness within you. It just takes taking the step.
Thank you so much. And I want to remind everyone that if you're ready to begin your epic journey, come to epicbegins.com. Find all the information I have. Get in contact with me. Also want to remind people that I've got a brand new TV show called Epic Begins with One Step Forward. If you'd like to be a guest, come to Xander at epicbegins.com. Let me know and I'll see about getting you on to the show. As always, I want to remind everyone that epic choices lead to the epic life that you want.
Get your gift copy of the award-winning book, Epic Begins with One Step Forward, at epicbegins.com. That's a wrap on this episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward with your host, Xander Sprague, best-selling author, internationally acclaimed public speaker, and licensed professional clinical counselor. To make your next conference or event epic, send an email to Xander at zander@epicbegins.com. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Remember, epic choices, epic life.